Okay, so this week brings us Guy Ritchie's new King Arthur movie, which was a project that I know a lot of people, well, typically this is everything, but this particular project had a lot of people saying, why? As I do think, as far as King Arthur on screen goes, I'd say most moviegoers, at least the ones I know, their definitive King Arthur movie was John Borman's Excalibur. And that was already, because we're in this age of, like, gritty retellings and darkening stuff and all that. Excalibur was what, 1981 or 82, somewhere in the early 80s, and it was already the bloody R-rated King Arthur movie. So to get another one in 2017 in this era of making things darker, it didn't seem like it had a whole lot to add, especially since we're only PG-13 anyway. Not that a rating matters or whether it makes a movie good or not, but still, as far as updating, it just seems like an odd movie to get in the era that we're in. Particularly from a director like Guy Ritchie, who obviously came to us with the great crime movies like Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then the whole Madonna thing happened, and we got, like, swept away, and everybody was like, well, this guy has gone down the shitter. And then he kind of came back with the Sherlock Holmes movies with Downey and Jude Law, where it was he still had a controversial approach to characters that have been around forever, like the whole bare-knuckle boxing thing. It's like, yeah, he's going to do Sherlock Holmes, but he can't get away from Snatch. I don't know if that's good or bad. But in this movie he shows that he does have a way of... He's not exactly the best fit for the material that he chooses, especially since he seems to have no intention of changing his style. And being a director whose work is so recognizable, that's, maybe not, if you're a big fan, you don't want him to deviate away from his style. But you can do stuff like, say, kind of like the direction Fincher took when he made Benjamin Button, after all the other movies he was known for, those, dark and violent crime movies. But still, this is very much... You can take this as a compliment or a critique. This is a Guy Ritchie movie. Up, down, sideways, and diagonal. Guy Ritchie all over the place. And starting with... well, for starters, we actually get these really bizarrely placed opening titles, where they just kind of begin, and you're not even quite sure where we are in the story, because everything is so... It's that, we're in a Guy Ritchie movie editing, where everything is trying really hard to get to the point as fast as possible, when it should probably be informing us a little bit before we get into some kind of frenetic style, but it does not want to waste time at all. The way they show the title in particular seemed really weird and misplaced when we see his parents being confronted, because obviously he ends up orphaned, and off to, in this particular movie, it's a brothel he ends up at, where he's raised. But the reveal of the title is a spear being thrown, killing his mother, and as her body falls back, the big triumphant music comes up and tells us what movie this is. And from then on, it feels like, I'm not sure the calculations in this movie are going to add up. just from those few moments at the beginning. So, and then right after that, this whole opening credit sequence gives us a very seizure-inducing speed-through of Arthur's childhood, and he just kind of slowly but surely becomes Charlie Hunnam in this really wild montage, if you can even call it that. And it's and also Jude Law's rise to power is in that montage as well. And it really does. I know this isn't a movie that you really have to drag out, because we know the basic outline. Because the King Arthur story has been changed so much throughout history, obviously everybody who tells it is going to add their own variation on it. But as far as the small outline, we know what the formula is to get to where we're going. But still, you can pace yourself just a little bit to getting to those moments. Because that's what, yeah, seeing exactly what kind of approach the new storyteller is going to take on this is one of the major aspects of the King Arthur story, because it's just changed so much with every different version of it. Like on top of, as far as the movie world, on top of Boorman's movie, we also had Antoine Fuqua's movie with Clive Owen, which took a lot of liberties and really wasn't that good. It was like the textbook definition of movies with that are like massive spectacles, but are as forgettable as they are big. So, but once we get into this, it's kind of, and it doesn't even stop with that montage either. Like, it goes right into, he has like a he keeps having dream sequences, because that's a wonderful cliche we all love. But then, it even gets to this is when you really start to realize this is much more of a Guy Ritchie movie than a King Arthur movie, and that is this altercation that Arthur has with Vikings that he then must explain. And I swear it's like a scene out of Lock, Stock, or Snatch. It's a scene just like it would be in Lock, Stock, or Snatch, and we're watching a fucking King Arthur movie. Once again, it really just depends on the person, as far as if these are compliments or criticisms. I don't think that Guy Ritchie's style really goes with this material at all. I mean, but at the same time, much like Sherlock Holmes, for instance, you're kind of put off at first because it's just so bizarre to see Ritchie's style with a story like Sherlock Holmes or King Arthur. But he actually has a way of kind of, you warm up to it after a while. Like, you get, I don't know if it's because his previous movies were so successful, but you eventually, if you're going to get into it, it will eventually kind of pull you in after a while, no matter how reluctant you are. Not that it gets good, per se, but it's entertaining enough. It is still mediocrity all over, but as far as, like, my biggest fear going into it was that it would be boring. Honestly, it's anything but that. But still, there's a lot to be desired and a lot of wondering why the fuck some things are in there. Like, Jude Law has this thing where there's, like, tentacle women in his basement, or whatever, whatever that dungeon-like place is. And it's basically, he basically has to kill a loved one and then just kind of and he's able to, I don't know how spoilery things are, but the point is that Jude Law basically has, remember in Batman vs. Superman, when Lex goes down and creates Doomsday with the water and the blood? Jude Law has that in this movie, basically. It basically looks like he's making Doomsday when he goes down with these tentacle women, whatever they are. They're like leftover extras from Fury Road or something. It's shit like that where you kind of wonder, because you know it's going to go completely off the rails. Like when you look at the updates, like Snow White and the Huntsman, for instance, when they just pretty much did whatever the fuck they wanted. And they added, there's like all the, I mean, obviously it always had like witches and sorcery in it and stuff, but I mean, they went way overboard with it. And you know, going into a King Arthur movie that kind of fits in with this Snow White and the Huntsman territory, you're kind of thinking, well, it's already got wizards and shit in it. We've already got Merlin, obviously, in most of the adaptations is a major character. So they're probably going to milk that and get really out of hand with that kind of stuff. You know, the CGI and the battles and all that. This is another one of those movies where the battles are... There's a big battle in the middle of the movie, and it's pretty much like that throughout, where it's... You can expect three things out of a big battle scene in this movie. A lot of slow-mo, a lot of CGI, a lot of fog. And not really clued into exactly... At the very least, I guess you can't necessarily argue that you don't know what's going on, because it is so fucking slow in the slow-mo department. you can pretty much tell. It's all a bunch of faceless people he's killing, but at least you can tell that it's Arthur killing them, which in another movie, sometimes you can't always tell even that. To go back to Jude Law, I did like the choice of using him as the villain in this part that the only other screen version of this character that I remember was Rutger Hauer in the Merlin miniseries. And I liked the idea that they were going to use him as the villain, because that's a character where research tells me that he doesn't have like a whole lot of origin as far as like literature and history go. So basically any time he's referenced in one of the stories, it's pretty much just the author just using him as a mold and then going with it on their own. And so he's a character that makes it really easy to kind of take from history or literature and make him your own in a new adaptation. So I really like that they chose that character for the villain here. And I loved the choice of Jude Law, obviously, who's very comfortable with Ritchie now after the Holmes movies. And I had heard that he was going to go over the top. Like, I'm as you can probably see, I'm typically choosy with the movies I see now. After over a decade of not having to pay for them, now I do. Basically, the main reason I went to see this movie was because of Jude Law. And yeah, he's not like over the top like Rita Repulsa, like I was kind of expecting from what I had heard, but that would have been amazing. But still, but he does have his moments. There is an actual scene where he goes full Mr. Blonde, where he actually cuts a dude's ear off and then tries talking into it. So, yeah, Jude Law, that kind of sells it in itself. Jude Law goes Mr. Blonde on somebody in a King Arthur movie. Okay. Taking on a role that's only been taken on before by Rutger Hauer, as far as mainstream adaptations. And he's even so evil that he somehow manages to drop an F-bomb in medieval times. That is how, that's just how evil he is. But that's the kind of thing you kind of have to accept, because people are probably going to pick this movie apart and say, like, you know, all the historical inaccuracies, it's got fucking wizards in it, people. But still, stuff like that, like saying fuck in medieval times. But then again, as I said, Guy Ritchie has a way of getting you, it takes about an hour, but after about an hour of the movie, I was like, okay, I fully accept this is not necessarily a King Arthur movie as much as it is a Guy Ritchie movie. And you can either go with that or you don't, and you're not going to be faulted either way, I don't think. There was, I did notice this is another one of those big movies that has a lot of humor that falls flat. That's typically an issue. There are a couple of moments. I liked that little moment when like those guards were chasing him, and then they all jumped off the ledge, and the three guards are at the top, and one of them goes to push the other one off. That was just a little funny thing. For the most part, it's flat to the point that I'm not even sure if half of it was, like half the stuff where I acknowledged I think that was supposed to be a little humorous moment, I can't even be sure. So it's whatever that tells you. Then there is, they've gone as far as to, I believe, add a character, like, kind of create an original character specifically for this movie with Goose Fat Bill, I think is his name, Aidan Gillen's character. And I actually really liked that guy. I wasn't sure, he was just kind of there, and we kind of think he's going to go away really fast, but then he ends up being a pretty major part of the movie. And so I actually liked a lot what they did with him, and the whole ring scene was nice, and the fight between them is really good. Until it goes into the whole lit up eyes and blurry shakiness shit that everybody's wanted to do since Batman Begins, if not before that. There should not be this many Batman references in a review for a King Arthur movie. And every now and then there's some stuff in there that's a bit distracting. Yeah, like, I don't know, watching a King Arthur movie, and then you get to the scene when he's gonna pull the sword out, and it's gonna be that big moment, the most famous moment in this story ever, that's been parodied and talked about and redone in all different ways. And who should appear but David Beckham? I don't know. I mean, it's not like he's bad or anything. He only has to say a few lines and stand there and be a little, you know, aggressive. But, I mean, still, it's just kind of... It's very easily takes away focus from your big scene here that you just put that random of a cameo in here, but... Okay, once again, it's a Guy Ritchie movie. We'll just have to accept it if we're going to go on with this. So, yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't necessarily dislike it, even. Like, it's, the fact that it's not boring is kind of enough for me, given what I kind of was expecting going in. And given what a lot of movies like this end up being, which is just really, just a real drag and a real bore throughout, that they were able to at least accomplish holding the attention for all the 2 hours that they had, is a pretty big step up for movies like this. I know that's probably being a little easy, but I do think this movie will probably be subject to a lot of criticism and a lot of ribbing and stuff. I can imagine the extremely unepic final line I can see being talked about and laughed at and parodied for quite some time. Kind of in the way, kind of like the last, it's a lot like the last scene of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, where you're just kind of waiting for them to come to a conclusion that we know is coming. It's going to be the big cheesy reveal. And it's like, you have this big giant production with all these big battle scenes, and you just told another big adaptation of King Arthur, and you end the movie with the line, "You sit at it." I don't know. But it's not like, I guess it's not like Miles Teller saying, "Say that again." So. But anyway, yeah, it's actually, after a while, I actually did start to warm up to it, even if, I forgot to mention Jaimin Hounsou's in it too, who I really love. He can, like, he has presence for miles and can stand out in even the shittiest of shit. So I really liked his presence here also. So yeah, I don't think there's too much else to say. Like I said, it's very... The real drag is when you know a big battle sequence is coming and you just kind of gotta wait for that shit to happen, because you know it's not going to be particularly well choreographed or shot or anything to really stand out from all these other everything blends in action scenes. The climax actually started reminding me of, remember those Deathstalker movies? I think even Mystery Science Theater did an episode on one. It felt like just a really, really big, huge budget version of like a Deathstalker movie. I know that's really not a compliment at all, but that's the vibe I was getting. So, yeah, and I actually was able to enjoy it well enough despite the fact that I had kind of distractions galore when I saw this just, like, 30 minutes ago, where there was... To kind of go off a little bit, but just to show you how I was able to watch this movie while this was happening at the same time. For starters, there seemed to be like shipments or something coming in for somewhere in the mall. So right outside the exit door of this theater, right where the screen is, there was a lot of trucks that were backing up. And you know when trucks back up and they have that really loud beeping to let you know they're backing up? You could hear that for most of the movie right outside the exit door, to the point that the first time I heard it, I kind of thought it was like a sound effect in the movie, or like some kind of thing where they were like bringing in present-day sound effects to like the medieval time setting. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Guy Ritchie? But then the more I heard it, the more I realized, oh, that's not Guy Ritchie's fault. And then, like, an hour in, it was like there was something in the air. Like, an hour in, these two morons came in, and they were in the wrong theater. Because there was another theater playing it all the way down the hall. But they came into this one, and you'd think they'd get the point that the movie is clearly in progress. But they sat around for about 10 minutes with the guy explaining to them in normal speaking voices that they were in the wrong theater, and they just didn't seem to get it. Even an employee even came in and tried to explain it to them, and they still didn't seem to understand. It took them about 10 or 15 minutes to get out of the theater and stop trying to figure this out at their normal speaking voices. But regardless of all that, it's still, like I said, it's really not that good of a movie. But I mean, it's entertaining enough. It's definitely not as bad as probably what you're gonna hear. I think yesterday had like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. It is definitely not that bad. So if you're able to just kind of get sucked into it, it would be. I didn't talk about Charlie Hunnam yet. I didn't talk about King Arthur himself yet. I was a little concerned because I do like Charlie Hunnam in general. Like I love Pacific Rim so much. I thought he was great in Green Street Hooligans. I've only seen a couple of episodes of Sons of Anarchy, which are fine. But then there are times like Crimson Peak where he can just be like very vacant and not present at all and leave no impression. So I was a little concerned and thought it was actually kind of a boring choice when I heard that he was cast. But he does all right. It was, I think, I'm not sure if it was a different one or not. It makes sense with the rock and roll connection. I think this was the one where, as soon as it was announced, the first person that was brought up for King Arthur was Idris Elba, which, go figure, caused controversy. I don't even remember that falling through. I just remember hearing that and then not hearing anything. I'm assuming this is the same King Arthur. I honestly don't know anymore because we always have that two productions of the same thing going on at once thing now. I can't tell if there's one production of something or multiple, but that honestly would have been interesting because Idris Elba, take, race out of the equation because that's where the controversy was coming from. Just having a magnetic actor in general would make this part work. But still, Hunnam's fine. He's perfectly fine. I can deal with that. So, yeah, that's pretty much what this was. I think we get Alien next week, which I'm actually getting kind of excited for, because, unlike a lot of people I know, I actually love Prometheus. I know that's not exactly the best opinion to have in that circle, but I really do. So I'm really interested to see what they do with this one, especially with that cast they've assembled. So I'm actually quite looking forward to that. So in the meantime, and yeah, there's going to be like a Versus tomorrow that my brother is going to do with me, so we have that to look forward to. So yes, that's what that is. So we're done here.